Hello lovely people, my name is Emma and today I'm doing the Penguin Classics book tag, and then I'm also going to follow up with a bookshelf tour of all of my Penguin English Library paperback classics. That is quite difficult to say quickly. I am going to focus on that particular collection today rather than all of the Penguin classics that I have on my shelf, because I do think I've got quite a lot in other different sort of sub collections that they've done over the years, and a few of like older copies that I'm going to replace with the English Library ones as soon as I can. So for today this is just going to focus on specifically the English Library paperback editions that Penguin have released. So this tag was originally created by Steve Donoghue and I will link him down below, and we're going to jump in with some questions. The first question says, Penguin Classics are the best reprint volumes in the whole world. How many do you currently own? I have 24 read and 14 unread Penguin English Library paperbacks, which is a total of 38, of which you are going to see all of them a bit later in the video. There is a timestamp down below if you do want to just jump to that bit and you're not interested in the answer of any of my questions. Most of these I do get secondhand off of sites like World of Books rather than necessarily brand new, because they are a little bit pricey, but they are one of the cheaper classics collections to buy. So that's one of the reasons why I was drawn to them, rather than the cloth bound editions, which are just a little bit too expensive for my taste and also a bit too heavy. I like paperbacks. Question 2 says, Penguins evolved roughly 7 million years ago. What is your history with Penguin Classics? So for me, Penguin Classics in particular are one of the reasons why I've been getting into classics. It's something which, it sounds very shallow, but having pretty covers means I'm definitely infinitely more likely to read them, and it's been a mixture of that kind of cross-section of wanting the collection because they do look aesthetically pleasing on my bookshelf, but not wanting to own any books that I'm not willing to read, and only willing to have books grouped together if I've actually read them. I have very strict read and unread bookshelves, and so this has been leading me to want to read more classics, which then means that I'm discovering a lot more books that I probably wouldn't have necessarily picked up that I've actually been really enjoying. Overwhelmingly, I enjoy classics more often than not when I read them, so I'm really appreciative of this particular kind of range for helping to get me into classics and for making it a little bit more accessible. Question 3. The Penguin Classic logo is of course a penguin, the world's most famous flightless bird. What classic just didn't take flight with you? And for me, that one is The Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft. This is probably the least fun I've had reading a classic so far. It was very short. H.P. Lovecraft is like an originator of a lot of horror tropes that we know, but for me personally, this book just fell really flat. The world building sucked, and I wasn't really particularly drawn in with any of the characters. It was very, very slow paced, and there was just none of that sense of actual intrigue in there, and there was a lot of exposition which was never really explained as to how we knew about it. So for me, the whole thing just didn't really work. It felt like a rip-off of a H.G. Wells that was just nowhere near as good. I don't actually know where Lovecraft and H.G. Wells exist in terms of in the canon of literature in interaction with each other over time. Maybe Lovecraft came first, I don't know, maybe I'm being a bit uncharitable, but it definitely didn't make me want to read any more of his stuff. So it was a little bit of a slog, even though it is only around 100 pages or so. Question 4 is, the emperor penguin is the most recognizable species, but Adelaide is everybody's favourite. I don't know what that means. What is your favourite Penguin classic? I've narrowed this down to 2. I'm sorry, I couldn't pick, but they're both from very, very different styles. One's relatively well known, and that's The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. This is the first Bronte sister that I've read, and I absolutely adored it. It's a slight scandal novel where basically a woman moves into town and a guy is pursuing her, but then it turns out that she might have some kind of nefarious past, and he ends up finding out about her history. But it was one of the early examples of showing a loveless marriage and also wanting things like a divorce in sort of the writing style of the time, and it was very, very blunt and honest about things like alcohol abuse and things like that. So it was really, really interesting from sort of a social perspective. Also, the main character Helen is just absolutely brutal. She has just got the most absolutely cutting wit ever, and it was such a fun reading experience. It really highlighted how funny a lot of the classics can be and how subtle some of the insults were in the time. Amazing. The other one that I really, really love, and I try try to make sure that as many people as I can hear about it, and that's The Beetle by Richard Marsh. This is a very similar story to Dracula. It came out in the same year. The back tells you that it once outsold Dracula. It wants you to know that very much, and it really is a similar story, but this time, rather than the Transylvanian vampire myth, this one is riffing off of the idea of Egyptian mythology, but it's following a very similar plot in terms of some kind of ancient creature coming over and then terrorizing a young woman, and our band of heroes having to come together to defeat it. It's super fun, super fast paced, and I think has more dialogue than some of the other classics out there, which gives it a slightly more modern feel. I say I think because I don't actually know that for a fact. It just felt like that when I was reading it. Absolutely incredible, and definitely one of my all-time favourite classics ever. Question 5 is Penguin Classics began in 1946 with the translation of the Odyssey. What is your favourite book from the 1946 or the 40s in general? So I actually had to go back and have a look at what I'd read, because I'm really bad at keeping track of when books were published, especially what year in particular. Rough general time frames I can do, but actual like years and dates, nah, not my thing. And it turns out I've only actually read 2 books from the Penguin English Library paperback collection that were in the 1940s, and those are both from Orwell. It's 1984 and Animal Farm. Both of them I really enjoyed, so I'm perfectly happy to talk about them. I don't feel like I particularly need to though, because they're both definitely like Orwell's most well-known work, and some of the most well-known classics out there. I would hazard a guess of most people end up studying at least one of these at school. I didn't, but they're fairly standard. Also, this one matches my hair at the moment. I like that. So I really enjoy Orwell's writing. Of the 2, I actually prefer 1984, but I think that Orwell has a wonderful turn of phrase, and whilst these are very well known, so some of the immediacy punch of them has been lost because obviously we know about them in kind of popular culture. It's fascinating to think about what kind of a real impact these would have had in their day when they were first published. So really fantastic books. Question 6 and the last question is Penguin Classics tries to enshrine the classics of literature. Name some books that you'd like to see enshrined. So I actually have 2 answers for this one. I would really like them to release more of Orwell's work, specifically his non-fiction writing. I think he's got a really interesting back catalogue of non-fiction, and I would love to see what they could do with some of that, because also, as far as I'm aware, they don't have any non-fiction in general in the collection, and I think it would be a really nice way of branching out for the Penguin English Library paperbacks to include more from British non-fiction writers. It could also include people like Darwin. I see no reason why not. I also would really love it if they would expand the H.G. Wells titles that they have. I've got all 4 that you'll see in a second of the H.G. Wells that they've released, but H.G. Wells has a ridiculously huge back catalogue, including like over 60 titles, ranging from the sci-fi to more like social commentary stuff, and I would love to see more of them in the collection. I am reading more, but I'm definitely more inspired to read them when they are in this kind of format, and obviously I do want to add to my collection, so I'd love to see that, and generally just to see more pretty editions of some of the H.G. Wells out there. When I've been looking to try and add more to my collection, there are very few, and they're normally horrendously expensive, which makes no real sense to me, because actually a huge section of his back catalogue is really good, so it's definitely worth checking out. So that is it for the tag. Obviously I tag anybody who wants to do this, feel free to, no worries at all. But now we're going to jump into the bookshelf tour, and this will be actually my first bookshelf tour on this channel, so do bear with. I'm going to run through my read books first, then my unread collection, and I will put timestamps down below again if you want to jump to specific points in that. The first one I have is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, The House of Mirth by Edith Wharton, War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells, and The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells, 1984 by George Orwell, Animal Farm by George Orwell, The Beetle by Richard Marsh, Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray, Dracula by Bram Stoker, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, At the Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson, Treasure Island and the Ebb Tide by Robert Louis Stevenson, The Call of the Wild by Jack London, The Five Orange Pips and Other Cases by Arthur Conan Doyle, The Sign of Four by Arthur Conan Doyle, A Study in Scarlet by Arthur Conan Doyle, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte, Persuasion by Jane Austen, and finally Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. Okay, and now we have my unread collection, of which they're in no particular order. Humphrey Clinker by Tobias Smollett, Emma by Jane Austen, A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Lady Audley's Secret by Mary Elizabeth Brandon. This one is a little bit dirty, apologies about that. The Murders in the Rue Morgue and Other Tales by Edgar Allan Poe. The Hounds of the Baskervilles by Arthur Conan Doyle. The Warden by Anthony Trollope, with a sticker that I really genuinely cannot remove, which is infuriating. Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. The 39 Steps by John Buchan. The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins. The Great God Pan by Arthur Machen. And finally, The Man Who Was Thursday by G.K. Chesterton. And there you have it, guys. Those are all my Penguin English Library Paperbacks classics. So obviously I'm trying to add to this whenever I can. Which is your favourite cover? I personally really like the colour scheme of Emma by Jane Austen, and I really need to get round to reading that soon. Do you collect these? If so, how big is your collection? And I tag anybody who fancies doing this tag. It's been really fun to do it. And if you'd like to see more bookshelf tours from me, it's something that I've not really done on this channel before, but I would like to give it a go of a little bit more. So I could potentially do one for, you know, all the unread books on my shelf, or a particular genre, or maybe my non-fiction collections, or anything like that. Do let me know in the comments down below what you'd like to see. Have a wonderful reading week, and I'll chat to you soon. Bye!